Welcome back. This was a fun one for me. I hope you guys enjoy.
Fantastic work. Bill sent over our next image today, and I can't wait to edit this one. He also said that he's going to be wanting to do, potentially, might hold you to this, but doing a reaction video on his channel based on how I edit this, so no pressure or anything.
That's right. Today I am reacting to Sean editing one of my photos. And let me lead it off by saying he absolutely killed it. He did a really good job editing this photo, a little bit different style than I would have taken, but I think it turned out really great. So let's dive in. I'll give you some commentary. And if you want to see the full transformation of all the masking and all of the tools that he used to edit the photo, go check out Sean's video. Go give him a thumbs up. Leave him a comment while you're there. Let him know that I sent you. Without further ado, let's dive in and see how he edited this photo. Okay, so here we are taking a look on the left at the raw photo, and on the right hand side is Sean's edit. So he had a pretty unique perspective to this edit, but there's a couple of similarities that you'll see when I show you how I edited this photo. First off, this subject is called the Lone Cyprus and is one of the most photographed trees according to the internet, if you believe everything that you see on the internet, and is in Pebble Beach, California. So one of the cool things that Sean did here was the gradient from dark to light as you move from the bottom of the photo to the top of the photo. So he really kind of muted that foreground, and it directs most of your attention at the center of the image, which is obviously the main subject in this photo. And then he really went for accentuating the highlights and the haze that's in the air. So the dark to light was really cool. I didn't think about editing this photo like this, and I think that's a nice touch. The other thing he did that was similar to what I did was giving the rocks a little bit more contrast and a little bit more clarity. That brings out a little bit more texture in the photo. You can see on the raw photo they are a little bit soft and muted and not very well defined. And then finally he used a brush on the tree itself. That's something that I did not do, and I went back in later in the video and we'll edit that with a brush as well. But overall I think this was a really good job with the edit. A little bit of a unique perspective and a little bit different than how I would have edited it, which is great. That's the thing about photo editing. A lot of it is subjective. Everybody has different tastes. Everybody has a different vision. I wouldn't have just trusted anybody to edit my raw photos. Having watched Sean's videos and all of his content, I knew he had the skills needed to get this done and do a great job. And again, this is subjective, so what might look good to you might not look good to others. But at the end of the day, I can look at this photo and respect the process that he went through. I have an understanding of why he did what he did, and it came out, in my opinion, really great. It's still a subtle edit. It's not over the top, but it works for the image. So now we'll take a look at the photo as it sits in my Lightroom gallery, and I'll kind of walk you through the different steps that I would take to edit a photo like this, and look at some of the different settings and how I tweaked this photo and my mindset behind the edit, which is a little bit different than how Sean did it. So let's dive in and take a look. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom taking a look at how this photo sits in my catalog. On the left hand side, let me blow this up, we've got the raw photo, original straight out of camera, and then on the right hand side is how the edit currently sits in my catalog. So you can kind of see the differences right away between how I edited this photo and how Sean did it. He really went the opposite direction with the blues and accentuated this haze and cloud cover that was in the sky. I took the approach where I didn't darken the foreground as much, but it does sort of still direct you to the center of the frame. Like I said, I also upped some clarity and contrast on the rocks to make them pop, give them a little bit more texture and feel. And what I was keying into was, you can see there's water here behind the tree, and I was trying to make that evident because it was hard to see in person and it's kind of hard to see in the photo. But I figured if I accentuate the blues in the sky and the water behind the tree, that this would pop as well, and I think it did, and it adds a little bit extra to the image. And here I didn't mask the tree itself, which I'd like to do now actually. I think I'm gonna do that. And that's one little tidbit of something I picked up while Sean was editing this that I didn't think of the first time through. Go in here and show you some of the settings. Now, how I kind of think about these things, I'd like to get the framing right first. So this was a small adjustment, 0.45, to sort of get the horizon, you know, exactly straight. Now that I look at it, I think I like this better. 0.09 looks a little bit better to me. So I like to get the horizon straight as kind of step number one. And if I'm cropping it for any specific platform, you know, 4x5, if it's going on Instagram or whatever. This currently has a profile called Modern 8 associated with it at about 60%. And I bumped the exposure a little bit, like I said, added more contrast, dropped the highlights down, actually brought the shadows up a touch because a lot of this here was clipped originally. Pretty much left the whites and the blacks alone. A little bit of a subtle curve here. Made the temperature of the image slightly more blue. So there's a couple ways you could do this, right? You can go into color mixer and you can bump the saturation of blues, or you can use the color picker and pick out the specific hue and crank saturation that way. The other way to do it is kind of cool the photo off. So here's what it'll look like without any color adjustments. And you can see it's a pretty warm photo as it stands with all the other adjustments. So cooling it off, that actually feels more true to life in my opinion. Vibrance is kind of a cool way to add color to the image without oversaturating. And in this case, I brought the saturation down a little bit. A little bit of clarity helps those rocks, like I said. A tiny bit of dehaze helps open up the sky. You really want to be careful with the dehaze slider and not crank it too much. Here's, you know, it's as you crank the dehaze slider, it starts to add saturation to compensate, and then you get a lot of noise like you can see happening here. I did have lens correction on the Sigma 24-70 profile built in. I like the distortion correction. I don't like the vignetting correction a lot of the time, so rather than leave this, you know, that you can see what a big difference that is in the image to not have the natural vignette that the lens gives you. For this image, I like having that there. You can see the edges are a little bit darker. Kind of gives it a little bit more of that moody feel, which is kind of what I was going for here. All right, so I'm gonna add a mask to the main tree here. And we're just gonna use the object mask, and it does a pretty good job. And there's a little bit here between the branches that's gonna brighten up the water behind the tree as well, and that's a common problem with the, you know, AI masking or auto masking. It's not super great with branches, and it's really tedious to go manually color this stuff in with a brush yourself. So for now, I'm just going to leave it and we'll see how it comes out. And that'll just limit a little bit of how much we can play with the exposure and the contrast and so on the tree. So let's go try to brighten this up a little bit. That looks good. You really see the change in the trunk there. And as I brighten, I'm going to add contrast to make it look a little more natural. And play around with the rest of the sliders. As you can see, the highlights is what really makes the water behind pop. So I'm not going to adjust that. I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit. Bring the shadows up just a tad. I like the way that looks. Basically leave the whites where they were. Leave the blacks where they were as well. And that actually looks pretty good. So there's your before, and there's the after. Like I said, a pretty subtle difference. But I like to keep things a little bit simple in Lightroom. That's kind of my style. You know, occasionally I'll do some over-the-top edits, but I like subtle changes that just really accentuate the different portions of the image. I hope you enjoyed this little editing tutorial and reaction that we did today. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.